Welcome to an in-depth look at a growing constitutional crisis within the United States. For years, the border has been a point of political contention, but recently, that friction has evolved into a direct legal and physical confrontation between state governments and federal authorities. At the heart of this struggle is the question of who truly holds the power to secure the nation's borders. From the banks of the Rio Grande to the chambers of the Supreme Court, the battle lines are being drawn. We are witnessing an unprecedented era where state National Guards and federal Border Patrol agents find themselves at odds, highlighting a deep-seated rift in our federalist system.
To understand this conflict, we must look at the U.S. Constitution. The Supremacy Clause in Article 6 establishes that federal law generally takes precedence over state laws. However, states like Texas point to Article 1, Section 10, arguing they have an inherent right to defend themselves against what they term an invasion. This legal interpretation is the primary engine behind the current hidden war. While the federal government maintains that immigration is strictly within its jurisdiction, states are increasingly passing their own legislation to arrest and deport undocumented individuals, setting the stage for a massive judicial showdown that could redefine American governance.
Texas has been the most vocal challenger to federal authority. Launched in 2021, Operation Lone Star has seen the deployment of thousands of National Guard members and Department of Public Safety officers to the border. With a budget exceeding $11 billion, the state has constructed its own barriers and deployed miles of razor wire. The goal, according to state officials, is to fill the vacuum left by federal policies. This massive expenditure and mobilization have led to over 500,000 apprehensions and thousands of criminal charges, creating a parallel enforcement system that operates independently and often in conflict with federal Border Patrol objectives. The conflict reached a boiling point when federal agents began cutting through state-installed concertina wire to reach migrants in distress or to perform their duties. Texas sued, leading to a high-stakes Supreme Court battle. In a narrow 5-4 decision, the court ruled that federal agents could indeed remove the wire. However, the ruling did not explicitly forbid Texas from continuing to install more wire. This legal gray area resulted in a surreal standoff where state forces continue to build barriers as fast as federal agents could dismantle them. It highlights the breakdown in communication and cooperation between two levels of government that are supposed to work together. While border states push for more enforcement, the war extends to the interior. Over 11 states and hundreds of sanctuary cities have implemented policies that limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities, ICE. These jurisdictions argue that immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility and that using local resources for it undermines community trust. This has created a patchwork of enforcement across the country. In response, border states have begun busing thousands of migrants to these sanctuary hubs, effectively moving the border crisis into the heart of cities like New York and Chicago, forcing a national conversation on resource allocation and the limits of state hospitality. This isn't the first time a state has challenged the federal government on immigration. In 2012, the Supreme Court case Arizona v. United States set a significant precedent. The court struck down several provisions of Arizona's SB 1070 law, ruling that states cannot create their own immigration crimes or policies that interfere with federal law. However, the current legal strategy used by states today seeks to bypass this by framing immigration as an invasion, a term that could potentially grant states emergency powers. Legal scholars are watching closely to see if the current conservative-leaning Supreme Court will uphold the 2012 precedent or pave a new path for state-led enforcement. The friction between federal and state governments carries a heavy price tag. Beyond the $11 billion spent by Texas, the federal government spends approximately $25 billion annually on customs and border protection. These numbers don't account for the social costs, including the strain on healthcare systems and schools in both border and sanctuary jurisdictions. Furthermore, the lack of a unified policy creates confusion for migrants and border communities alike. When federal and state agents aren't on the same page, safety risks increase for everyone involved. The hidden war is not just a legal debate. It is an expensive and logistically complex reality for millions of Americans. As we look to the future, the resolution of this conflict will likely define the next century of American federalism. Will the federal government reassert total control over the borders, or will states successfully argue for a larger role in national security? The outcome of the hidden war over immigration will influence more than just border policy. It will determine the balance of power between Washington, D.C. and the individual states. For informed citizens, staying updated on these legal developments is crucial. The debate is no longer just about who enters the country, but about the very structure of the United States government itself.